Today, we are going to talk about an event that you probably don't know about concerning the prophet Elisha, something that makes us think about how and why this was possible. But before we get to this episode, we must understand who Elisha was and learn a little about his ministry. In the biblical narrative, few characters stand out for the intensity of miracles and the remarkable influence in their time as the prophet Elisha. Successor to the renowned prophet Elijah, Elisha emerges in the scriptures as a figure of notable virtue and divine power, whose life and ministry transcend time and resonate through generations. His journey is marked by an extraordinary calling, impactful miracles, and unwavering dedication to the service of God and the people of Israel. Elisha was the son of Shaphat from Abel-Meholah in the Jordan Valley. The only information about who Elisha was before what is recorded about his ministry can be found in 1 Kings 19. However, no truly clarifying details are revealed about his biography. Nothing is said about his place of birth, but we might assume he was a native of Abel-Meholah. We also do not know his age when the prophet Elijah invited him to join him, although the biblical account in 1 Kings 19:21 seems to indicate that he was young as he sought to say goodbye to his parents. It is also possible that Elisha's family had some resources, for when the prophet Elijah found him, he was plowing with 12 pairs of oxen, driving the 12th pair. The fact that Elisha sacrificed the pair of oxen seems to indicate his religious upbringing and his commitment to ending his old way of life and dedicating himself exclusively to the new one to which he was being called. As we have mentioned, Elisha was the personal servant of the prophet Elijah before he was taken to heaven. In the first description of a public act by Elisha, he is remembered as the one who poured water on Elijah's hands. On this occasion, he predicted the victory of the armies of Israel, Judah, and Edom against Moab. Scholars suggest that in this episode, it is possible that the prophet Elijah had not yet been translated and Elisha was still his servant, although the account of his supernatural departure is recorded in the previous chapter. This suggestion is made because the prophet Elijah wrote a letter of punishment to the son of Jehoshaphat, King Jehoram. When Elijah was about to depart, see what Elisha asked him for as an inheritance. In 2 Kings 2:9, when they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elisha said, "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." After Elisha asked Elijah for a double portion of the spirit that was upon him, Elijah replied that this would be difficult, but if he saw him being taken up, it would happen. As they walked and talked, a chariot of fire with horses of fire descended from heaven and separated them, and Elijah was taken to heaven in a whirlwind, while his mantle fell upon Elisha. Elisha then took up Elijah's mantle that had fallen and returned to the bank of the Jordan. Upon arriving there, he used the mantle to divide the waters of the river, just as Elijah had done before, and crossed the Jordan on dry ground. The sons of the prophets who were in Jericho saw this and said that the spirit of Elijah rested upon Elisha. They went to meet Elisha and found him in Jericho. They told Elisha that there were 50 strong men among them who wanted to search for Elijah, as they thought the Spirit of the Lord might have taken him up and left him on some mountain or in some valley. Elisha allowed them to search, even though he knew they would not find him, and so they went but found nothing. Then the men returned to Jericho, and Elisha decided to go to Bethel. It is on this journey that something beyond our human comprehension occurs, and you probably don't know the intriguing story behind this event. But first, we must also highlight that Elisha's call to the prophetic ministry was made by God himself, who instructed the prophet Elijah about this on Mount Horeb. If we consider the period of his ministry starting from his call, we can conclude that his ministry lasted about 50 years, spanning the entire latter half of the 9th century and covering the reigns of Ahab, Ahaziah, Jehoram, Jehu, Jehoahaz, and Joash. In the record of Elisha's ministry, we notice an interesting diversification regarding his activities, ranging from contact with an indebted widow to dealings with wealthy, powerful men and monarchs. Elisha's influence in the palace of Israel was significant, with several episodes showing his impact on the kings and the court. His presence was seen as essential, both for spiritual advice and guidance in political and military matters. In 2 Kings 6, the king of Syria tried to ambush the army of Israel several times, but each time his strategies were thwarted because Elisha, through divine revelation, informed the king of Israel of the enemy's plans. This demonstrates how crucial Elisha was for the security and defense of the kingdom of Israel. On another occasion, the king of Syria sent an army to capture Elisha, but the prophet prayed that the eyes of his servant would be opened, and he saw the horses and chariots of fire sent by the Lord to protect them. Elisha then led the Syrian army to Samaria, where God delivered them into the hands of the king of Israel, who in turn let them go in peace. Besides political and military aspects, Elisha also played an important role in the spiritual and moral guidance of the kings. He frequently warned them against idolatry and encouraged them to seek God in all their decisions. Another remarkable and well-known episode was the healing granted to Naaman, the commander of the army of the king of Syria, who was a powerful and respected man. However, he suffered from leprosy, a disease that had no cure at the time. The healing of Naaman is recorded in 2 Kings 5 and reveals the extraordinary way God works through obedience and faith. When Naaman learned that there was a chance to be healed, he went to Elisha's house. Upon his arrival, the prophet did not go to him, but sent a messenger to tell him that he should bathe 7 times in the Jordan River to be healed. Naaman was initially outraged by the simplicity of Elisha's request and refused to comply. He expected a grander and more dignified treatment befitting his position. However, his servants persuaded him to obey, reminding him that if the prophet had asked for something difficult, he would have done it, so why not do something simple? Thus, Naaman went down to the Jordan River and dipped himself 7 times, as Elisha had instructed. As he dipped, his flesh was restored, becoming clean like that of a child. Naaman was completely healed of leprosy. This story illustrates the importance of humility and obedience in the life of faith. Naaman needed to learn to trust in God's word, even when he did not fully understand God's methods. His healing did not come because of his social status or military power, but through his simple obedience to God's word through Elisha. It is a powerful reminder that healing and deliverance come through faith and obedience to God's word. Elisha played a crucial role as the leader of the schools of prophets, following the tradition established by Samuel. These schools were centers of teaching and training for prophets, where disciples learned about God's word, prophecy, and how to serve the Lord. Elisha was not only a powerful prophet, but also a teacher and mentor to the young prophets. The Bible does not provide many details on how exactly Elisha established the schools of prophets, but it is clear that he played a central role in this process. He likely recognized the need to train and equip a new generation of prophets to continue God's work in Israel. As the leader of the schools of prophets, Elisha was responsible for leading and teaching the disciples. He shared his wisdom, experiences, and divine revelations with them, preparing them for their own prophetic ministry. His leadership was based on the authority God had given him and the example of a godly life that he lived. Elisha not only taught the disciples, but also guided and encouraged them in their spiritual growth. He was a living example of how to live a life consecrated to God and how to listen to and obey his voice. His relationship with the disciples was one of discipleship and mentorship, where he invested in their lives and prepared them for their divine calling. By leading the schools of prophets, Elisha ensured the continuity of the prophetic tradition in Israel. He was concerned not only with his own ministry, but also with ensuring that there were other trained and ready prophets to serve God. The impact of the schools of prophets led by Elisha was lasting. The prophets trained by him played important roles in Israel's history, prophesying, advising kings, and being God's messengers to the people. Elisha's leadership in the schools of prophets was essential for the preservation and continuity of faith in God amidst the difficulties and challenges faced by Israel. The account found in 2 Kings chapter 4 is also well known and emphasizes Elisha's prophetic ministry. The episode of the widow's oil multiplication is a remarkable story that demonstrates God's power in responding to the needs of his people. A woman whose husband was a disciple of the prophets was left a widow and burdened with many debts. Her creditors threatened to take her 2 sons as slaves to pay off the debts. Desperate, she sought help from Elisha, the prophet. Elisha asked her what she had in her house, and she replied that she had only a little oil. The prophet then instructed her to borrow many empty jars from her neighbors. He told her to go into her house, close the door, and start pouring the oil from her jar into the empty jars. The woman followed Elisha's instructions, and the oil from her jar miraculously filled all the jars she had collected. She was then advised to sell the oil and use the money to pay off her debts. The miracle of the oil multiplication not only saved the widow from slavery, but also demonstrated God's care and provision in times of need. It showed that even when everything seems lost, God can intervene and do the impossible to help his faithful people. This story also illustrates the importance of faith and obedience. The widow could have doubted Elisha's instructions and refused to act, but she chose to trust the prophet and follow his directions, resulting in an extraordinary miracle. The account of the Shunamite's son is further proof of God's power working through the prophet Elisha. This story is found in 2 Kings 4:8 and onward. A wealthy woman from the city of Shunem frequently invited Elisha to meals at her home, recognizing him as a man of God. She and her husband had no children, so Elisha, in gratitude for their hospitality, prophesied that she would have a son the following year. The miracle happened as Elisha had predicted, and the couple had a son. However, when the boy was growing up, he went to the field with his father and began to feel unwell. He was brought back to his mother and died in her arms. The Shunamite woman then set out to find Elisha, who was at Mount Carmel. When she found him, she threw herself at his feet, showing deep anguish over the loss of her son. Elisha sent his servant Gehazi ahead with his staff, instructing him to place it on the boy's face without attracting attention. However, when Elisha arrived, he saw the boy was dead and prayed to God. He then lay on the boy twice, and the boy came back to life, sneezing 7 times and opening his eyes. This miracle brought great joy to the Shunammite woman and her family, once again demonstrating God's power through the life and ministry of Elisha. This story also highlights the importance of faith and persistence in seeking God amid life's difficulties and trials. However, one of the most controversial episodes involving Elisha, which we are eagerly awaiting to discuss here, is the incident with the bears that mauled the boys. This account, found in 2 Kings 2:23, is often misunderstood and can seem disturbing at first glance. In the episode, a group of boys mocked Elisha, calling him bald-head. In response, Elisha cursed them in the name of the Lord, and 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of them. Although this story may seem difficult to understand in light of God's love and mercy, it also contains important lessons. It highlights the seriousness of mocking the authority established by God, showing that our words and actions have consequences. Additionally, the episode underscores the importance of respecting God's prophets and messengers, even when we do not fully understand their methods or messages. As a servant of God, Elisha deserved respect and obedience, and the divine response to the boy's mockery served as a reminder that God does not tolerate disrespect towards his authority. Therefore, while the episode of the bears mauling the boys may be difficult to understand, it reminds us of the importance of revering God and his servants, recognizing his authority and sovereignty over all things. Elisha's ministry was marked by a profound demonstration of God's power and faithfulness. From the moment he was called to succeed Elijah to the miracles he performed and the prophecies he proclaimed, Elisha was an instrument in God's hands to bless and guide the people of Israel. Elisha's story teaches us several valuable lessons. Firstly, we learn about the importance of faith and obedience. Elisha trusted in God's word and obeyed his instructions, even when they seemed difficult or incomprehensible. His faith was rewarded with miracles and abundant blessings. Furthermore, Elisha's story highlights God's goodness and provision. In the midst of difficult times and impossible situations, God was always present to provide a solution and demonstrate his love for his people. Another important lesson we learn from Elisha's life is the importance of service and caring for others. He not only served as a prophet and spiritual leader, but also showed compassion and care for those in need around him, as in the story of the widow and the resurrected son. Finally, Elisha's story reminds us of God's sovereignty and power over all things. He is capable of performing miracles and fulfilling his promises, even in the darkest moments. In summary, Elisha's story is a powerful narrative of faith, miracles, and divine provision. It challenges us to trust in God in all circumstances and to seek his will in our lives. May we learn from Elisha and apply these lessons in our own faith journey.